Hello everyone, welcome. Today we're going to be making a landing pad. This could be used for a small spaceship, helicopter, or even a hovercraft. When I started this project, I kind of got a little overambitious. I was planning on making 3 landing pads with some gangways connecting them to make it kind of like a modular spaceport. It was going to be amazing. But then I started designing the first one and it ended up taking a lot longer than I thought it would. Plus, I don't actually have any spaceships or dropship type models yet. Well, I did buy a LAT LE recently, but it isn't painted yet. After doing some research and getting a general idea of how I wanted this landing pad to look, I cut the basic shape out of foam board. This piece is 10 inches by 12 inches, but the actual landing area ended up being a little bit smaller. I would say it's big enough to accommodate a ship no more than 10 inches long, which is the perfect size for a LAT LE, or any spaceship that I may craft in the future. Using a drawing compass, I made 2 perfect circles in the middle of the pad. I started connecting corners until a design started to appear. Then I used a highlighter to block out some areas where I wanted the steel panels to be attached. I knew I wanted a mesh border around the outside of the pad, so I blocked out areas for that in red. I copied the design on the cardboard using tracing paper. Hey, who took the cardboard back off this tracing pad? Now it's all flimsy. Was it one of you cats? I bet you it was one of those cats. They're up to something. Next, I cut the red areas out and I came up with a symmetrical design for the center of the pad. I traced that out as well and copied the entire pattern onto a cereal box cardboard, making enough copies of each panel to cover the whole pad. Believe it or not, I actually added rivets to this thing. I know I'm really moving up in the world. I used a nail punch and a hammer to gently tool some rivets into each cardboard panel. Next, I cut out the mesh pieces. You can usually find this mesh stuff on office furniture at the dollar store or Goodwill. These are rough cuts. I'm going to cover up the edges anyway, so as long as they cover up the holes, it doesn't really matter. After hot gluing the mesh down, I needed a flat surface to work on. I also wanted to be able to see the design underneath so I could line the panels up. So I cut some spacer pieces out of cardboard to raise the center of the platform up to the height of the mesh. I left gaps between the spacer pieces so I could see the pattern underneath just enough, and I used wood glue to secure them in place. Keeping everything flat was very important from here on, so I laid some parchment paper over the pad and I weighed it down with this overpriced paperweight, and I let that dry overnight. The next morning I made some sour cream pancakes. This is my new favorite way to make pancakes, and honestly I don't think I will ever make them without sour cream again. They're so easy to flip. Look at this flip in action. I'm just going to tuck that under there. Perfect. Oh, they kind of look like landing pads, don't they? Time to get back to work. I guess the paperweight weighed it down too much. This glue is still pretty tacky. I decided it would be smart to glue the circular part down to a full piece of cardboard instead to give it a little bit more support. Once it was dry, I glued it to the pad and weighed that sucker down again. I cut out some pieces to sit underneath the top panels because I needed to raise them up to sit flush with the center piece, and I needed to cover up the mesh as well. I tried my best to make sure everything was lined up, but there still ended up being a few gaps. Considering I cut everything out by hand, I think it looks pretty good though. And once again, I weighed everything down. I was considering making the steps modular, but instead decided to inset them and glue them in place. So I cut the remaining foam board out on each side to make room for the stairs. And I used a 2-inch thick foam board to raise the platform up just enough so that a trooper could stand underneath, because it is going to have a bit of an overhang. I used a pin to trace the outline of the pad, then connected the dots and cut the piece out. A Proxxon wire cutter would have made this really easy, but I don't have one of those yet, so I used a big dull kitchen knife instead. It made a terrible cut, but that's okay because it's going to get covered up with cardboard anyway. I cut too much off the side here, so I glued some smaller bits of foam board on to fix it. I cut some 2-inch strips of cardboard and bent them with a straight edge so they would wrap around the foam, and then I glued them together. Remember those pieces I cut out to make holes for the mesh? Well, I'm going to use them here. I cut them into smaller triangles and braced the overhanging portions of the pad with them. That helps give it a little bit more support, so hopefully it doesn't break. I also added some square pieces for the stairs to nestle in between, and I also cut out some moldings to cover the outside edge of the mesh here. Since this is secretly a raised gun platform, I built some 3-sided barricades to sit in each corner. I believe that that's a 22.5 degree angle. These pieces are going to be pretty visible, so I wanted them to have a clean join line. Next, I cut out some wraparound moldings for the barricades and the sides. For the steps, I added a wide step midway down the staircase.
It's so wide.
It's wide enough for a few models to stand on. Aside from that, I left some gaps on the longer steps rather than using some full pieces of foam board. I figured they'll be hidden anyway, so there's really no point in using more foam board than I have to. I had to work with the stairs a little bit to get them to fit snugly. And I cut some railing pieces to finish them off. Same thing on the other side. For some reason this one had a gap at the bottom. I'll hide that later. Next I added a few more cardboard moldings, covering up any exposed foam edges. Okay, time for some Mod Podge. This is going to help protect the foam from the varnish that I'm going to spray on it when it's finished. I primed the entire piece with Vallejo primer. I could have and probably should have just mixed some gray paint in with the Mod Podge, but this works too. Then I dry brushed some plate metal onto pretty much the entire landing pad. Went in with some black paint. Added an oil wash. First brown, then black. At this point the panels were kind of starting to blend together, so off camera I had to retrace the panel lines with a hobby knife. And at the time of making this I had just picked up a mega set of Army Painter speed paints, and this was the first thing that I tested them out on. I know this isn't an ideal way to use them, but I really wanted to try them out. I added some yellow and some blue to the pad. And the yellow ended up just not being vibrant enough, so I went in with some Averland Sunset. Since this is a landing pad, the yellow should be nice and bright. And I also thought the gray needed to be broken up a little bit, so I added some lighter gray to a few panels, and that really helped add some much needed contrast. After a little more weathering, I was ready to call it done. I didn't add any elemental weathering to this project because I wanted to be able to use it on any map, so I guess this is technically my first all-purpose terrain piece. Overall, I'm happy with the design. I think the circular part in the middle could have used maybe a little bit more work. I'm probably going to be making a larger landing pad at some point, and maybe some gangways, and I should have a ship painted up by then, so there's most likely going to be a part 2 to this, maybe even a part 3. We will see. So I want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to support the channel further, there are some links down below. Check them out. I hope you have a good day, and I will see you later.